There's something so significant about the church, and that's it. Like, it doesn't matter what language we speak, um, God speaks a language to us. It doesn't matter where we're from, it doesn't matter how our week's been. But church has the same voice all around the world, and that is that we matter. That God sees so much value in each one of us, and that each one of us matters. So, if it's your first time at Gracegate today, I just want you to know that you matter. I don't know how your week's been. I don't know what's going on in your life, but you matter, and you matter to us. And the reason you matter to us is because you matter to God. And we're a church where basically we're not a bunch of perfect people. We're journeying to life together to try and figure out who God is and to try and grow in our spiritual journey of faith. And you couldn't have joined us on a better day, because today we are finishing up on our series called Shifting Gears. Have you enjoyed it? Yeah. Have you shifted a gear over the past couple weeks? Yeah. I have loved having the conversations with people who have just continuously said, man, it's time to shift gears. It's time to stop playing it safe. It's time to step outside of my comfort zone and to actually give God control of what he wants to do in and through our lives. And if today's your first day and you're wondering what this whole thing about shifting gears is about, is we've just been pretty much having conversations about how we're at one point in our life, but we know that God actually wants us maybe to be here. And as Jesus followers, we just want to follow him step by step. And we're asking ourselves the question, what's the next step? What's the next gear that we can actually just change so that we can continue to follow Jesus step by step? And this is pretty much who we are as a church. So over the past couple of weeks, we've just been sharing who is Gracegate, what is the church. It's not an organization, it's not a building, but it's people. And over the past few weeks, we looked at a few themes. The first one was that we connect, that we're intentional about connecting with people. And as we saw that green man on stage, that's our sort of our mascot, that, hey, we don't just want to stay in our comfort zone, but we want to actually move across the room. We want to move to a need. We want to connect with people, not just how was your day, but actually go a bit deeper, dig a bit deeper. So that's in the context of we connect. And we saw how we looked at the story of Jonah and how Jonah was fleeing and going away from a task that God was actually wanting him to go towards. And we asked ourselves the question, hey, what are we running away from that God actually wants us to run towards? And then the week after, we looked at we serve, and we said, hey, we want to be defined as a church and as a community that serves. Wouldn't that be awesome if people outside of this community saw us, and when they spoke about Gracegate, they said, man, those are the people that serve. They go out of their way. They serve, they serve, they serve. And they serve because that makes a difference. That makes a difference in our community. And then last week, we looked at the other topic of, if we can go to the next one, on we give and generosity and the power of generosity. And how, the church has often been described as a place where actually it wants your money. But we don't think God wants your money. He actually wants something for you. And how there's so much beauty in being generous and living a generous life. And we looked at the reason we do this is because this is what Jesus has done for us. We saw how he emptied himself. He became poor so that each one of us can become rich. So that's pretty much a quick summary of the series. And today I'm stoked because we speak about probably one of the most exciting topics, I feel, about shifting gears, and that's about we invite. We invite. If you don't remember anything I say right now, I just want to share the crux of this whole message. So if you're already starting to doze off, if you got jet lag, because I know some of you are still just came from South Africa, whatever you're feeling today, if you forget anything, all right, if you're going to go on your phone soon, don't forget this, all right? This is going to be the crux that I want to share with you guys. And that is this, that you have the power to change the trajectory of someone's entire life. You have the power to change the trajectory of someone's life, entire life. You have the power, no matter who you are, no matter your age, no matter how you came in here this morning, you have the power to change the trajectory of someone's life. And we know this. And this happens through basically an invitation or a series of invitations. All of us, if you take some time and you just think about some of the invitations that you have received in your life, you'll see that this actually can change everything. Some of us, the reason we're here today is because someone said yes to an invitation, right? Some of us, the most exciting experiences that we've had in life has come through an invitation. Someone who actually said, hey, Wes, why don't you come with us? Why don't you do this? And it's actually been one of the best experiences in my life. But on the other end, some of us as well have probably had the greatest regrets from accepting invitations, right? You know what I'm talking about, that invitation that you accepted and you live with that and you're like, man, I wish I just said no to that invitation. Invitation has so much value, and an invitation can literally change everything. If you think about some invitations in your life, you can see that there's probably a time where it's been a defining moment, the way you answered that invitation. If it was an answer of yes, or if it was an answer of no, that's probably a defining moment in your life. So if you forget everything I say today, I just want you to know that you have the power to change the trajectory of someone's entire life. It's in your hands today. So as we embark on this invitation and we're speaking about the church and this movement, I want us to try and understand, like, who's the church for? Like, what's the church all about? And Paul, the apostle that I speak about quite often, he shares something in this context, and he's pretty much sharing about, hey, who the church is for. Trying to help everyone understand that the church is for everyone. And today, as we sort of go through this text, I hope in some way it can unpack and clarify what the church is for, what its purpose is, and also how we can actually embark on sharing this invitation. So we're going to look at this text, and it's from Romans, and this is Paul sharing here. He says this, he says, "For there is no difference between Jew and Gentile. The same Lord is Lord of all, and richly blesses all who what? Who call on him." Paul's sharing here, and it's at a time where the church has basically just started. It's going pretty strongly, but then there comes this tension where people the Jewish nation were actually, are they the church, or actually is all the Gentiles who were unbelievers, who were Greek unbelievers, they were coming and sort of becoming and starting to follow the way, becoming Jesus followers. And there was this tension, like who's the church? Who's really the Jesus followers? And Paul pretty much opens up with this, and he says, hey, that I just want you to know we're all on the same boat. We're all on the same boat. Everyone, Jew and Gentile, they're all the same because everyone falls short of God's glory. And he says, yeah, that, hey, the Lord, like God says, infinite value on each and every person. It doesn't matter who they are, where they're from, what they've done. His value for us never changes. And then he says, and he richly blesses all who actually call on him, He goes on and he says this. He says, for everyone who calls on the name of the Lord will be what? Will be saved. Will be saved. I love this. And in this context, he's speaking and he's saying, hey, like, honestly, you can be saved. You can be saved. You can have eternal life. And Paul referring here is not only speaking of something that will happen in the future, but actually you can be saved. If you call on the name of the Lord, you'll see that here Paul strikes a huge dilemma, that there's actually a dilemma about this. And I think that happens to us as a church. And he says this. He says, how then can they call on the one they have what? Not believed in, right? And how can they believe in the one of whom they have not heard? And how can they hear without someone preaching to them? Paul says, hey, there's good news. I want you to know that actually there's this Jesus guy, all right, who accepts everyone. Everyone's on the same path. That is what the church is. The church is for both churched and unchurched, just people who call on the name of God. They're going to be saved. They're going to find meaning in life as they follow Jesus. And he says, yeah, but there's a dilemma. And he says, hey, how can they actually call on the name of the Lord if what? They have not believed in him, or they have not heard about him. How can they actually call on him? How can they cry out for help if no one is actually sharing and saying, hey, there's actually someone who can make a huge difference in your life? He says, yeah, and how can they hear without someone preaching to them? How can someone call out for help if they don't know that there is help? He goes on and he ends it like this. He says, and how can anyone preach unless they are sent? How can anyone preach unless they are sent? As it is written, how beautiful are the feet of those who bring good news. I thought about this and I thought, man, Paul's writing here and he says, how beautiful are the feet. Are there any people here who have great feet, good-looking feet? Yeah? That's kind of crazy language there, right? How beautiful are the feet. But it's the significance isn't in the feet. The significance is in the action of the feet. He's saying, hey, how beautiful is the church? How beautiful are the people who actually go and bring good news? I mean, if you think about it, how beautiful is this community, Gracegate, when we're active, when we're not just sitting on our chairs, but we're moving towards someone who's in need. How beautiful is it when we're actually truly connecting, when we're actually truly serving, when we're actually truly giving to make a difference? He says, hey, this is what awesomeness, there's so much awesomeness in bringing good news. This is the difference maker. Now today, I didn't want to be really morbid about this, but I think we sit in the same dilemma that Paul was sitting with this church. And that is that there isn't a lot of good news. There isn't. We know, and I know in this big audience, there's a lot of us who are going through so much difficult stuff in our life. We know so many people going through difficult stuff in life. And I thought, hey, I can't miss out. I can't not share about this, of what's happening in our community. Why does church mean so much to me? Why do we run all these programs for our community? Why is it so valuable? Why is it so important? Why do we celebrate our young people in our community? And that is because there's a problem. There's a gap. There's a lot of bad news happening in our community. And I could not let go but share some stats. And this stuff just sits horribly. It says like, this was from the New Zealand Herald last year when they did a whole article on this. They say every 67 hours, a young person in New Zealand kills himself, takes their life. Think about that. Just let that sit with you. 67 hours, every 67 hours, a young person decides, hey, life's too tough, can't go on, I don't want to do this anymore. It says that that's more than one every 3 days or 130 a year. That is not okay. That is not okay for us to be a community and say, hey, we'll just sit, we'll just think about this and not do anything. There has to be a shift. There has to be a gear change. There has to be feet who actually go and bring good news, bring hope. The other stat that the Herald shares is this, that our youth suicide rate, 25 and under, is the second worst in the developed world. The teen rate, 15 to 19, is the worst, so high it raises the global average. That is not a stat that we want to be proud of. That doesn't sit well. And that's why, as a community, when we speak about, hey, you have the power right in your hands through your invitation to change someone's life, to change the trajectory of their life. Paul shares, hey, how will people know that they can be saved? How will people know that they can be rescued? How will our community know that there is actually someone who cares about them, that there is someone who will actually come next to them and connect with them and serve them and be generous with them, if no one's actually going out and saying, hey, you're invited. Hey, you're welcome in this space. Hey, I want you to know it doesn't matter what you've been through or what you're going through or what you've done or what you haven't done, but that you're welcome in this space and that there's hope. That's what the church is. That's just one angle of a dilemma in our community. And I thought, man, if I could stand here all day and share about, man, what is happening in our community, the problems, the things that we see, the struggles, the addictions, the dysfunctional families. What are we going to do about it as a community? What are we going to do about it as a church? Now, back in the day, when the church first started, Jesus got together and he called his disciples, and pretty much he went around and he just chose guys who were pretty much incompetent. They weren't the best of the best. They didn't have the greatest skills, and he calls them all together and he says, hey guys, I want you to follow me because I want you to know that you have power to change the trajectory of someone's life. All of them are busy fishing. They're doing all their own trades. And Jesus comes up to them and he says, hey, follow me and I'm going to make you a fisher of men. I'm going to show you that your life can have so much more purpose when you follow me. And so these guys abandon everything. They leave their nets and they start following Jesus. And step by step, as they follow Jesus, day after day, there were about 12 of them. They're learning from his ways. They're learning from his teachings. These guys mess up consistently. Consistently, they're getting it wrong. Jesus is telling them one thing, they're doing another thing over and over and over again. But it fascinates me to see that Jesus then would say to these guys, hey, I want you guys to be my inner crew. I want you guys to actually take this gospel, this good news, into the whole world. Jesus then one night, he calls them all together and he says, hey guys, it's time. It's time that I'm going to actually complete my mission. I've come here to be the Savior, to actually save this world because I love it. I love everyone in this world, and I'm actually going to die and I'm going to be raised from the dead. And all the disciples, it didn't really sit with them, and they didn't really believe it. And it comes to the time when actually Jesus dies, and what do all of his closest mates do? They disappear. They go out in hiding. They put their head down, they weep, they're despondent, they lose hope. They see that, man, we thought that Jesus was the Savior. We thought that, hey, he's going to set his kingdom up, and now he leaves us. He abandons us, and there's no hope. They don't have vision. They don't know what to do next. And at a time when Jesus then is raised from the dead, Mark, who was one of the eyewitnesses, actually shares about this account when Jesus is raised from the dead, and he goes to see Mary Magdalene, one of the first persons who sees him. And I want to share a bit about what happens in this context. Mark shares it like this. He says, she went and told those who had been with him and who were mourning and weeping. So Jesus has just been raised from the dead, goes to Mary Magdalene, and she's stoked about it. She's like, man, I can't believe that this is actually true. And she goes and he shares with them, the guys who actually follow him, the closest, the disciples, and they mourning and weeping. And then it goes like this. when they heard that Jesus was alive and that she had seen him, what did they do? What? They did not believe it, right? They didn't believe it. The closest, the guys who were journeying with Jesus for 3.5 years, you would almost call them the church people. When Jesus is raised from the dead and he appears to Mary Magdalene goes and actually shares with them and says, hey, Jesus has actually been raised from the dead. There's hope. There's actually hope in this world. And they don't believe it. Then he goes, and it goes on. Afterward, Jesus appeared in a different form to two of them while they were walking in the country. These returned and reported it to the rest, but what? But they did not believe them either. They didn't believe them either. Doesn't this blow your mind that the guys who were closest to Jesus, who were consistently like following him, like maybe were turning up to church every Saturday, they did not believe that he actually had the power to be raised from the dead. And then it goes on, and later he appears now to the 11. 11 disciples are there. Judas wasn't there anymore. As they sat at the table, and he rebuked their unbelief. Pretty much he says, hey, it's not acceptable about your unbelief. And he says, and the hardness of your heart. Hey guys, come on, you've been following me for a long time now. Come on, you should have known. I told you all of this stuff. He rebukes the hardness of their heart. And because, and he says again, because they did not believe. Because they didn't lean in and just trust. And it says, those who had seen him after he had risen. Now what I love about this story is that when Jesus appears, we see that even his closest people who were following him actually didn't believe. And you would think then, oh, okay, now what's going to happen? Jesus rebukes them. He's upset with them. He's telling them, hey, I can't believe you guys have such hard hearts. And then Matthew relates it like this. He shares it like this. After all of this, he says, then Jesus came to them and he says, hey guys, just come closer. I just want you to hear this. All authority, in other words, all power in heaven and on earth has been given to me. Now, if you think about that, Jesus was either extremely arrogant, right? Extremely arrogant, or he was actually telling the truth. And because they had seen that Jesus had actually just died and rose again, because they were eyewitnesses of what had happened, hey, they were like, hey, we'll go with that. All authority, all power. In other words, hey, Jesus had the capacity now to do and say whatever he wanted in heaven and on earth. I don't know what the disciples were feeling at this stage, but if Jesus had just rebuked them, I'd be a bit scared, right? What's he going to say now? He's saying, hey, I've got all the authority, I've got all the power. And then he says this, he says, therefore, go. And I was wondering, imagine Jesus just took a pause there. Imagine he just said, therefore, go. I can just see Peter thinking to himself, see, I told you guys, messed up again, that's it. That's it. We didn't make the cut. He doesn't want us to actually carry his kingdom into the rest of the world. Man, if only we had worked harder, if only we had tried harder. But he doesn't. Jesus doesn't take a pause there, and he says, therefore go, and he says, and make disciples of all nations. Now what's fascinating about this is that Jesus turns to the guys who have just a few verses earlier not believed in him. And then he turns to them and he says, hey guys, all authority, I've got all authority on heaven and on earth. So in other words, I can do whatever I want. And then he turns to the disciples, the guys who've just messed up again, and he says to them, hey guys, I want to give you guys the ownership. I want to give you guys the responsibility to go and make disciples of all nations. Doesn't that blow your mind? That Jesus actually says, hey, you see, the thing is, it doesn't matter what you've done or who you are or how you've messed up or that you even don't believe in me, because they didn't believe in him over and over again. But he says, hey, I want you guys to take this invitation to all the world. And they do. And that's why we're here today as a church, because these guys lived it out, even to the point where they'd sacrifice their life to make sure that this invitation would still go out. And what I love about this is that it wasn't about them believing in God, but it was more about God believing in them. That shifted everything. You see, I don't know about you guys, but if I have to think of believing in myself and in my own strength, I'm hesitant to share an invitation. It's hard. I feel stressed. It's hard even to speak to some people at times. But when I see that, hey, it's not about me, there's a bigger purpose, a bigger need, a greater need, I see that, hey, God will go and he'll just use me. He'll just use me to be an invitation. He shares then also with them, he says, and surely I am with you always to the very end of the age. Surely I'm with you always to the very end of the age. I'll never leave you. I'll never abandon you. If we go to the next slide. You never know what hangs in the balance of an invitation. You never know. We don't know what hangs in the balance of an invitation. Simple invitation, just walking across the room and just saying, hey, I just want to know you to know that you're invited. In October, I think it was October 2012, I received an email, and it was an invitation. It said something to the context of the Kiwis are calling, come to New Zealand. And I remember reading that email and hearing about, hey, this community, this small group of people who are together on Auckland's North Shore, who actually want to make a difference in our community. And I can't now tell you how I never ever knew what hangs in the balance of actually accepting that invitation and saying, hey, yes, I want to come out here to New Zealand. It's about 6 and a bit years later now, and I am so passionate about this community. I'm so blessed about this community who connects, who gives long hours to serve our community, who gives financially to make a difference. I'm so blessed to be a part of this community who invites, who knows that, hey, this community, you don't have to measure up in any certain way, but you can just be invited and you can come as you are, because when people start coming and a part of this community, God just shifts. He does what he does best. We start seeing our intrinsic value. We start seeing how God will never abandon us. We start seeing that God doesn't want anything from us, but he wants something for us. We see that actually when we start following Jesus, our life can be better because we tend to make better and wiser choices. What a privilege it is for me to have actually said, yes, I want to be part of that invitation. And I know that today as we sit here, God's been speaking to each one of us, and he's been saying something to you about how you need to shift gears. He's inviting you into something. He's challenging you to actually invite someone else. And I just want us to actually just be responsive and just say, hey, yes, use me. I'm willing. I'm open. I want to accept that invitation. When we see the need, how can we neglect it? And how will people know that there's hope? How will people know that they can be saved that they can be rescued if no one actually goes and be's a voice. We never know what hangs in the balance of an invitation. Today we're going to end off with just a song, and I want us just to close our eyes where we are and just have a conversation with God. Just speak to God and just be like, hey God, we've journeyed through the Shifting Gear series. We've spoken about a lot of things, but hey, what do you want to say to me personally? What do you want me to actually action? What do you want me to actually, do? What do you want? Where do you want me to actually be those beautiful feet that actually can bring some good news? And as we listen to the song, I just want God to speak to you. Maybe it's actually just God saying to you, hey, you're valued. Don't believe all those lies that people are speaking into your life. And then I just want you to respond. You to respond and just say, hey, you know what? I want to do that. So let's just close our eyes. We'll listen to the song and just respond and speak to God.